Hello, and welcome back to another video for eCIO. This one is on using eCIO and the forms that are attributable to PMI. These forms are kind of organized by process groups, including initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing. Within each of these process groups, the forms are arranged sequentially as presented in the PMBOK Guide 5th edition. We'll also show you a description of each form along with the list of contents and a brief explanation of the type of information that goes into each field. In some cases, we'll show you a form and what it looks like when it's completed within eCIO. There are three facets to using the PMI forms. We'll show you one of the books that it's based on. It's a Project Manager's Book of Forms. I'll bring that up and show you where you can get more static copies of the forms. They're in .doc form, and we'll show you how to access those. Within ECI, we have a couple of other additional flavors. One is somewhat a little bit more dynamic than just using Microsoft Word. It actually shows you who's accountable, who's tracking some of the history on the collecting of the information. And then a third option is more along an enterprise resource planning, where you actually can get into much more of the details, tracking strategies, tracking ownerships. It becomes a lot more involved and a lot more thorough and in complete detail. So we'll start, the introduction, we'll just do a quick introduction. We can, here is one of the backends. It's called just implementing PMI framework forms and processes. Within it, when you normally get eCIO, you will get just a standard backend, and then when you go into the click on the tools, then you can relink and set up different backends. And what that does for you is you could use the PMI component for as a training ground, and we'll show you that. Use this as a training ground, showing the forms, getting some of your new practices in place. You can use in-house forms, and then copy the back end and tailor that one for your own specific in-house forms on that. So this is this particular back end that's used by eCIO. Now, much of the information you can look at. I'll bring up a copy of the book. So this is a Project Manager Companion. It's by Cynthia Snyder. So this is just showing some of the information that's collected on each of the artifacts within eCIO. There's what the book looks like. If you want to go into it and you have the back end, what you can do is just go to click on the hyperlink which we've got in there, and in fact here's where you can pick up the static forms. Just click on the chapter you're dealing with, and you can pick up the forms. You can go through this one without actually buying the book, but the book is a great book. It's I think well worth it. A lot of details we've captured into eCIO, but you can kind of pick up a lot of the information on here. So in chapter 1 they talk about project charter, which we're going to show you a demo of, a stakeholder analysis matrix, a stakeholder register, so you can kind of look at those particular elements. So one of the things, so back to a little bit of eCIO. So just as a refresher, we have the overall map, which you can look at. There's a separate video that goes into this a little bit more detail. So we're going to really look at some of the there's project programs. What we're going to look at is probably the documentation, and the various forms or instruments, which are really the templates to the information. The artifacts are detailed information that's contained within each of those templates, and then we have our action items and deliverables on that. So what we'll look at first, we'll go into, we can do a search, but we're going to look at some of the listings on the back on the forms, and then we'll tie those into the functions within that are defined under the PMI. So under instruments, and that was a complete list, and for those that have used the product, you know you can tailor that menu. So these are this is a list of a number of different types of forms that are being used in detail. We'll show you those. Initiating forms, so there's a project charter, there's some of the other forms that are related, so that's a tree view. For monitoring, these are the forms that are listed. Planning forms, there's a series of planning forms that you can kind of slow down the video and have a little bit more detailed look. Executing forms, and then closing forms here. So all those have been defined in the base backend, and we can look at those. The other thing is, so we'll look at, we also have the functions, and these are some of the functions that are illustrated. We haven't related, they're all in there, but we just haven't related all of them. And so on the initial group, we have develop project charter, identify stakeholders as the functions within this in this point. So we're going to go look at process group overall, which is or the initiating process group, and we'll go and look at some of the tombstone data that's collected with that. There's some of the information, and then if we go to, we'll just bring up a profile. You know, those are reports. The other one collects, I'll show you that just briefly. Collects, here's the information that we can collect on each of the functions that are contained within, in this case, PMI. But we'll look at just a profile on this one, some of the information we've collected that's shown. And you obviously within eCIO, you can, everything is related within it. So if you find a form, you can find out the process is related. And we'll show you some of the fields that are tied into the forms. That'll come a little bit later. So we'll bring up the reporting module. And we'll pick out the function. And this was initiating. And again, you know, some of the things that we notice is that on each of the main entities, we know which backend we're dealing with, and the time and version control and some of the background information. Again, what you can do is copy this and use this for your own particular in-house needs. And this is the form here. So this is a profile form on the initiating process group. It has a little bit of a description into it. Again, this can be, you can tailor this for whatever project you're working with. The roles, if there was a relationship, your AC, any allocation, if this happened to be tied to a particular function. In this case, it's just a PMI function. We kind of put in some goals and objectives. Just you can have these ones that also relate to tasks. You can say, you know, how well you're doing on that, and who has responsibility in whatever your key indicators on your goals are. Some input, so the plenary, in this case we've just got one plenary meeting. These are the activities that are associated with ownership on it, executive sponsor, commitments. Applications, if there was any applications with this process group. The documentation that's being produced through this process. If there's any background information you want to look at that's related to this process, you can it'll be identified there. If there's a contract that might be associated with the business process and IT. Some of the services, if you're getting into looking at services, it'll tie that process into any of your service catalog, related functions, and then any descriptions that you may want to look at as well. So that's a brief overview on the functions. If we wanted to look at forms, so we'll bring up a viewpoint, and then you can do reporting on different on the list of forms that are included. So this is a list of some of the reports. What we're going to do is now bring up a project charter too, and what the demographics on that look like. And again, you can modify these to whatever your particular in-house needs. Here's some of the relationships that we can define with the form, and then again cross-reference those. What we'll do is we'll bring up the profile on what a project charter PMI, how it's defined. We can see here's the information that's collected on a PMI project charter. So we have a little bit of an overview. We have any definitions that might be included, some of the work instructions that might be out there, any stakeholders that are associated with it, some of the other roles within it, just the roles, and then organizational, maybe your audit group, some of the related other forms to project charter. So these are other informations that could be either inputs or outputs to your charter. Related functions, which we talked about, the process group. And then we do have a little mini, a number of different ways to track this. So we've put under configuration items the attributes that we have, so they're kind of document elements. And with an overview on it. So this is how it's defined, and it's with a little bit of descriptions on each of those. If there were some action items, and we'll look at this project charter example, which is one of the simpler ways to kind of put some of this information in. Table of contents, what each of those are. So that is that's just an overview shown as in Cynthia's book. And then we have we can show and pull up a report. We're going to do a search on reports. Let's do a search on documents. And the simplest way is to produce a deliverable with your table of contents. Within the deliverable, you have action items and statuses, who has ownership, so you can review a little bit of that. This is really driven from the deliverable, so we'll just show you how that works. Now this will be a little bit some of the narrative in there. You can also pull up a blank form and then export it to PDF or to Word itself, so it gives you a little bit of an idea of what you can do within it. Charter ranking is some of the information we have on who the author was, the PM. Table of contents, so this tends to be all dynamic, and then we have an overview. If there's an overview project, if there was a figure that was included, then those would show up. And then at the back end, we have a number of other related tables supporting information, version control, that you can have the authorities on that. And then if you print it or export it, you want to email it. Then you can email it in any of the particular types of formats you want. And that should be it for our project charter. And well, I'll just pop into our and now what we're going to show you is a little bit more of the dynamic side of eCIO in terms of a project charter and some of the information we've collected on it. So we have, excuse me, we can do a search for our charter. There's a number of different types of charters. There's a short form, and then there's a project charter. Corporation meeting charters. We'll just bring up the charter for a, and here's so we need some selection criteria in here. We'll pick out a project. A lot of times if you complete a portfolio program, or it'll show you the projects assigned. If you leave it as unassigned, it'll default to all of them. And we'll bring up an example. This is a store equipment rollout. I'll show you some of the information that's collected on it. So in this case, some of the demographic information, basic demographic, description value, some of the strategies, and some of the information associated with those strategies, the years it was applicable, some scope statements, what's in scope, out of scope, high-level overview on the budget and financials, some of the goals, objectives that might be tied to either a corporation or to an organization, years that were tied to it, those are shown. Management plan in terms of what we want to do in terms of checking out new practices within this one. So this is part of your kind of SEPG or your CMM process improvement initiatives. The risks that are directly related to this project, if there were other risks that are coming from other projects that affect this project, then they would be shown here. A list of our issues that we have in place, and this is a random list here. We have a number of them on it. Some of them we did categorize. Shows you your traffic light indication, the roles, high-level view of the roles that are going to be tied to this project, any cost information, average loaded rates. If there were meetings or associated other deliverables, those would be shown here. Some high-level tasks you can track. You can do it also through Microsoft Project. If there's applications that are tied, and again, if we go in to look at these applications, it would also show you the projects that are tied to those applications, so you can track some of those. Any other related projects, some of the configuration items that might be in there. And then this is actually FTEs by the month, so you can kind of have an idea about over the period of time what's happening. Any stakeholders, any affected business functions. When you look at the business functions, you can tie those back to the projects. Services, so this would tie into your service catalog, what needs to be done. Related organizations, and then if there's any meetings associated with that. And those are really driven from, some of the information that I think we may have showed you, but we just revisit it. We're going to go to, we could do a search on the project name and it would pop up, but we know the number, so we'll bring up project 154, which is with our store delivery. And there's our store, and then this was an example of some of the information that you can collect on from a project. So some of the estimation, financials, and when we go into a little bit more detail, we can talk about where some of those fit in. And that concludes our project charter under eCIO. Thank you very much.